But my nasty hands has eczema. Are you gonna see it?
No, it's so far.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Let me see. How long have we known each other for?
I always try to calculate it, if I'm doing a birthday post, whatever. And I always say grade 7, but I don't know
how many years that is.
It must be like 22.
Yeah, it is 22.
I probably did it recently for your birthday.
That's
22
crazy.
years.
That's a person.
I know.
That's a young adult.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Did we meet in the change room? I feel like that's my
sounds
first real memory of like when we met.
Interesting.
Was in gym class in the change room.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's right.
I guess I never realized or thought at the time that we'd be this close to this day, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
But when we look back and we think about everything that we've been through, we've like really been solid in each other's lives. Like,
our turning point was like in grade 11.
11, yeah, I think so.
Before then, we had like a similar kind of circle of friends. But we weren't like tight.
No.
Yeah.
No.
We
I don't
weren't
think we
tight.
were tight, but we were always like playing with each other. Like, that sounds weird, right? We were always like on teams together.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like we kind of know each other more through like sport and gym.
And gym. And then I think grade 11, we were like, had all of our classes together.
Except one,
yeah.
And I remember being frightened.
Wait, like, what do you mean?
Because we didn't know each other that well, and I'm like, are we gonna like get along? We have every class together almost.
Yeah.
Like, how is this gonna go? And that's when we got so close.
So close. Yeah. That was like the changing point.
That was. I guess, like, when people enter relationships really, really quickly and they just, like, go all in, I guess it works sometimes, right? You just find out. You're like, okay, do you vibe? Yeah, it's crazy that we've been friends for so long and that we've stayed friends for so long. And because we have stayed friends for so long, we've also, like, witnessed each other go through each other's, like, friendship phases with our own friends. Because, like, even though we were super close, I mean, I don't know if I really like this term, but, especially when you're young, everyone has, like, a best friend. And we weren't, like, best friends.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, we were very close friends who had our own best friends.
Yeah.
So we kind of witnessed, like, each other's relationships with
our own friends, set of friends.
Exactly.
Yeah. For sure.
Which I guess is interesting because, like, sometimes you're all in the same group of friends, and maybe that's why things
worked out.
Yeah, exactly, because we weren't actually in the same group of friends. Yeah, so in that time, obviously, we've seen each other have friendship endings.
Yes, true.
For various reasons. So when I think about it, there's a few reasons why friendships end. Sometimes it's just natural. Like, of course, people's lives go in different directions.
Yep.
You kind of just don't have much in common anymore.
Yep.
Especially when you have childhood friends. How you make them is because you literally just all live in the same neighborhood and go to the same school,
it's like
right?
situational.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm here, you're here, and okay, we get along from who's here, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then, as we know, there are also intentional endings,
yes,
right? Whether it be on like your side or the other person's side, maybe you just don't feel the friendship is like healthy for you anymore. And then I'd say there's also like abrupt endings.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe like no one planned for the relationship to end, but it kind of just did.
Right.
What are your thoughts around friendships ending, and why do you think friendships end?
I think they mainly end because the two individuals, they grow apart, or they have different values, they have different happenings. Does that make sense? Different happenings?
Like different things going on in their life? Yeah.
They've entered different stages in their lives, and like a lot of the times now that we're older, we're looking for people who energize you, who bring positivity into the circle, and who are able to support you through everything, no matter what it is, right? And I think what you said with the 3 reasons why friendships end, I think it just comes to the point where we go separate ways because that service is no longer there. It's okay though, right? But when we were younger, I feel like friendships ending or having those fights were like the biggest deal, right? And like that's what like crushed our world, and essentially those were our breakups, right?
For sure. Yeah.
It was so hard to deal with like when we were younger, but when you have more insight as you're growing up and like who you want to be, I think it's important you're keeping company with those people who support that and your growth and your personal development.
Yeah, totally. So you were saying like those were like our breakups. They totally are. I remember like, I don't know, watching a video about how when you're that age, like especially in like middle school, high school, how things feel so much more intense for you. And it's because they are. Because they were saying how like you're actually developing, like just however you're still developing during that age is like why it also feels more intense for you. I think like grieving a friendship is not something that you grow out of. You know? Like you said, you kind of better understand when you're older like why things happen and like can kind of make peace with it better. But how have you dealt with grieving friendship? You know, missing friendships that have ended?
I think that still happens like to this day here and there, depending on, you know, the situation, the memory, the occasion, whatever. It's a part of life, right? We kind of like learn to realize what is beneficial and what is going to bring harm to yourself. And I at least go through like a little bit of a contemplation of what has happened before, what it could be maybe now, but it's really like I look at if it is directly going to be beneficial to who I am, who like my family and like, you know, all that kind of things. And it's really a memory. At the end of the day, it's a memory that serviced you at the time and it brought you what you needed at the time. But moving forward and where you are now and into the future, it's so limited now, right? Like I feel like I have very limited close friends for these reasons, right?
Yeah. And it's also like when you're older, I mean you got 3 kids. So you know all about like growing responsibilities and you really have limited time to put effort into a friendship. Yeah, but I think, like you said, to this day, like it doesn't really go away. If you had a really deep friendship with someone, if you knew someone for a really long time, experienced a lot with them, it's like going through a break. It's like a past lover, you know?
It is.
You're like, oh, like I still miss them. I still think of them. And it's like, do I text them? Like, you know? It's like, do I text them because I'm thinking about them? Or do I realize, no, I can think about them and love them from afar and know that it's best for us to like not try to rekindle something.
I 100% agree.
I guess I think the other reason why it's really hard to keep friendships from when you were young is because you have a really idealistic view of what your best friendship should be. Right? It's kind of like your first experience at a relationship. And it's like this person has to always be available.
And we're holding them to higher expectations, right? And really they become our world. It's kind of unfair when you think about it now that you're saying that.
We're like doomed to fail.
Actually. And there's actually no real lessons on how to be a good friend. Right? And how to like sustain one. So I think that really shows that in time you're gonna drift apart.
It's like, I guess, like a experimental phase.
It is.
You know what I mean? Right? It's because like you're so immature. Right? Like you're so immature at that age. You can't even manage your own, like you don't even know what emotions are, you know? And you're like, this person's got to like always be available for me to give advice, like
to respond or to hang out.
And it's like, that's what we consider like a good friend. You know what I mean? Did you have those same type of like unrealistic expectations, you think, at that age?
Absolutely. I think making friends in my childhood, it was like we were always together because of church, right? We always had a community to be able to lean on each other, and we literally were growing up with each other at the same time because of that expectation of they're always there, we're always hanging out, we see each other so frequently. That's what you hold as standard to what a good friend or best friend is, right? Only now where you realize when you're a little bit older, a friend doesn't have to be there for you 24/7. Right?
They probably shouldn't be. Like it's probably
that's a red
that's a red flag. I mean, like no one can really be though, right? Like even your partner. I guess it's the whole like you only learn when you're older that other people are not responsible for your happiness, right? Like even your partner, everyone has their own life, right? I guess the thing is like when you're young, you have no boundaries for yourself or with other people that it's just like your lives become very enmeshed. Because you made friends from being in the same school. Everyone lives so close to each other. So like your access to each other is so easy. Right?
Yeah, for sure. And you're seeing each other every single day. Right? So it's like we're talking about school friends. And like it's crazy too because when I'm in front of my students.
And your students are how old?
They can be from anywhere from 14 to 17 years old.
Okay.
It's crazy to think how when we were in high school, our teachers would be like, this is not the end all be all. High school is not the end all be all. At the time, you're like, this is all I know.
What are you
right?
saying?
Like, I can't imagine, you know, my friend's not coming with me like past these walls.
Yeah.
And now I'm turning things around and I'm the one like, I know, I understand you're going through a breakup. I understand you're having drama with your friends, but this is so small compared to what's going to be.
It's true, yeah. But I think it's like telling someone to have perspective before they have that perspective.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's more now looking back, you can be like, oh, remember, like our teachers used to say this. Like, you don't gain that wisdom until you're out of high school and really like make solid friendships later on.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't go to university together.
It's true.
And that's
distance makes the heart grow fonder.
Oh, 100%.
I think there was something to that.
Each other in
no,
high school.
never.
Yeah.
Never.
So it's like you went through 4 years plus the 18 months in Sheridan. So there's like a big chunk of time where we're like not physically
It's true.
seeing each other. Maybe I would come to your birthdays and stuff like that.
Yes.
Right?
And we had a long distance relationship.
We did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like looking at our path of friendship, that's probably the way to go.
Yeah.
Not that we could have chosen that. But it's I feel like that natural path is what allows you. I mean, that's not to say that like some people you'll just grow apart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
if
yeah,
you don't really have the potential to be good friends anyway, then maybe you just go different ways and you grow apart.
Yeah.
But it's like if you kind of have that potential, that space gives you time to like grow separately and then come back together.
Yeah, figure things out together or share what, you know, growth you've done independently and come back together and like really grow together again, right?
It's true.
Like, it's kind of like a whole...
It's a wave.
It's a wave. It is.
Yeah. How did you handle like fights in those friendships? Or did you even get into fights? Did you get into arguments? Because I think another thing of like an idealistic friendship is thinking that like you don't get into fights.
I feel like I don't think we got into fights.
It's like the same thing people think about a romantic relationship. Like, oh, if everything's fine and we just don't fight, like, oh, we have such a good relationship. But it's like, no, actually that means you're not communicating.
Yeah. And I think that's what I was mainly kind of used to, not fighting and learning how to fight afterwards.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like because you avoid having fights, what ends up happening with these like long-term friendships is you actually build a lot of resentment. You know, about like all these little things that you've probably never said.
Yeah.
And that you probably at that age like don't even realize you should say.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And don't know how to. I think you try to avoid fighting just to make it all like peaceful and like harmony, and then
it's about play, right?
About play.
Like you said, like when you're young, it's about play. Like it's just like let's have fun together.
Let's avoid fighting.
Yeah.
And then you don't really know how to fight later on.
Then you just start throwing tantrums when you're like 30. But you know.
That's funny.
So like you said, now, I mean, obviously at this age, you have a much smaller group of close friends. I have a much smaller group of close friends. What do you think makes a good friendship?
I don't know what makes a good friendship, but I know what makes a good friendship for me. Like we talked about, it's not like being there 24/7, but I know I can depend on my friends, and I know I can depend on them for like the emotional support, to have a good time, to hang out, the social support, and being able to talk ideas over and just like having that collaboration with each other to be able to like figure out the problems with each other. And like I think it's important that the friends you do have are able to know how to support you, and if they don't, it's open enough for you to be able to ask them like the type of support you need.
Yes, right? Totally. And yeah,
I'm sweating so much.
I see the
suddenly
because we're like now in the
suddenly I'm just like overheated. I'm like talking and I'm like dripping and I'm like
I see it happening
right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes with emotional maturity, which you don't learn until you grow older.
Yeah.
If you choose to go down that path to you know, develop yourself to build that. When I think about our friendship and how we've been friends for so long and live such different lives, it really makes me realize being a good friend is caring about each other's lives and pursuits and supporting each other, even if you don't have a personal interest in it. You know what I mean? You do teaching and I work in tech. Like it's, totally worlds apart, right? You have 3 kids.
And you are trying to make it on freaking YouTube right now.
We have different hobbies, different creative endeavors, you know what I mean? But it's like we support each other through that and like have a genuine care and interest in each other's lives and what you're aiming to do. Right?
Yeah. I agree. Like we said, I feel like when we were younger, our friendships was like always having to be with each other, like constantly 24/7. But our friendship has shown that you don't need that constant 24/7 communication or even like meetups or whatever it is, right? But that care, like you're saying, the actual genuine care that you have for the other person is what really solidifies the friendship, what makes the friendship keep going.
Yeah, exactly. When I talk about showing that interest, it's like actually asking each other, going to each other, asking about updates. Like, if you told me a thing, I'm kind of following up with you and thinking about it. And it's maybe not the next day or maybe even not the next week, but it's like, oh, I've remembered this thing that you told me, right?
For sure.
Do you find that like do you have friendships where you don't feel like you get that reciprocation?
Yeah, for sure. And Aiden always asks me like, why do I still keep those people around? And I think it's not necessarily to service me in that sense, but it's also but for me it's like I can still give back. I can still share like support and I can still care for them in that sense. I don't look back and say like, oh yeah, like that's my good friend, right? But it's like it comes to like circumstantial things like we were talking about earlier, where it's just they're in my life, right? And it's like I have to accept too that like not everybody in my actual life will give that type of support and that energy like we talked about, but I still as a person deeply care for them, so I will still give that lending hand. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. And it's kind of like you probably have more capacity to do that, right? I mean,
I was gonna ask if you have people like that. Yeah, I feel like you cut the fat. That's what like people say, right? Like cut the fat.
I feel like I do have people like that, but like you said, it's also like circumstantial and situational to like what other people are going through too, and like at different points in time, like people are going to kind of be more, I mean, everyone's the main character in their life, right? So people are kind of going to be more consumed of like what's going on in their life. I think the other thing that I've like, I don't know if I've fully made peace with it, but I'm trying to make peace with, is realizing that not every friend needs to fulfill and check off all these boxes,
for sure.
So, do you know Esther Perel? She's like a psychologist that talks more about romantic relationships. But she talks about like how nowadays we put so much pressure on our romantic partner to fill all these needs that in the past a community would fill. Right? So it's like, you got to be like my romantic partner and satisfy me sexually, but you also have to be my best friend, and you also have to, you know what I mean? And it's like, I feel like when we are young, same thing. We are like, my best friend has to check off all these boxes, right? And honestly, maybe having this notion of a best friend, this like concept of a best friend is maybe what's not healthy.
Right.
Because like it probably isn't one person who's going to fulfill all of our needs. And so what I've kind of realized is like, some people are like my closest friends, my best friends, are the ones who are fulfilling those emotional needs and support, but other people fill other needs, right? Like they're people who you're just like, you're a good time to hang out with, right?
Exactly.
So it's kind of like, I don't want to necessarily use the word like value, but I mean that kind of is what friendship is.
Yes. When you're saying like fill other needs, I think it's like that's what I was trying to like say. Like they're not necessarily fulfilling my needs, but the need that I'm trying to fulfill is like the need to give back. Like I always want to like
interesting.
be there for somebody.
So that's like, your need you're fulfilling.
Yes.
Oh, very interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why I think some of these friendships are to me. It's like literally fulfilling.
It's like your way to give back.
Yeah. I don't know. Is that weird?
No, that makes sense. It's funny because like inherently by what you're doing, it's like not selfish because the need that you're fulfilling is actually giving back.
But it is like, it feels selfish. Like it feels like it's this need that I always feel like to be there for somebody. It's that's how I'm doing it, right?
Right.
And
so, but that means that person for you is giving you value.
Exactly. Right? And I never thought about it that way, right? Because like, we always think about two ways, right? But we never really can be humble enough to be like, oh, actually they're giving something back, right?
Right.
It is true.
Yeah, so I feel like that's something that you learn when you're older. I never thought about it in that way.
Yeah.
Because I guess you're always kind of thinking, you are like, well, what is this person doing for me? But it's like, oh, actually this person
is like letting me fill my cup.
And I think it also is what you were saying about like those waves. I guess at this point, what we're saying is like a friendship is like a romantic relationship minus sex. Like literally it is. And which your romantic partner is your best friend at the end of the day, right? So it really is. But it's like you do also just naturally go through these waves where like depending on what's going on in your life, one person is supporting the other person more
so than
right, like it's never like this 50-50, right? So it is very contextual based on like what people are experiencing
at the time
in their lives.
I
mean, I was saying like, what do you think makes a good friendship? I guess more from the angle of like someone being a good friend to you, but what do you think makes you a good friend? And I guess like, is it something you've thought about?
No,
really, never.
It's okay, so like me and Aiden were talking about recently, like, why does everybody always come to visit us?
Okay.
And we always have like therapy sessions. Right? we call them therapy sessions where we're just like, like hanging out, chilling, and like all of a sudden like all these things pour out, right?
Yeah.
It's great times, good times, but like we find ourselves in this position often, right? Where like people just come. And like I don't want to say people, friends come, and it's a good time, and we're hanging out. But we're like, we try to like analyze ourselves, like why is this happening, right? Like obviously we feel like very positive, and we feel like happy to have people over, and like to be able to entertain, and like to create that space for people. But we're like, I don't know why. Like we're just like, I don't know. Like it's very hard. Like
I feel like there's those people who have that energy and vibe that makes people want to like feel, not even want to, it's like you said, creating that space. It's like feeling comfortable and safe to kind of like unleash that. Do you enjoy talking about that?
Enjoy talking about what?
Well, when you say like people come over and do these therapy sessions or like get into like deep
enjoy
talks.
we love it.
It's also like you're very receptive to it, and like you ask questions.
I have an idea. Yes. Okay. I have an idea. I now know what the answer is. I think people want to go deep, but in their actual immediate circle or friends or whatever that they spend most of the time with, it's just to have a good time.
Right.
It's just to hang out, be social, like grab a drink, whatever, right? But when they come to us, like Adian, he's very analytical. He asks so many questions. I'm genuinely interested in getting to know people, so I also ask different types of questions. And I think maybe like our friends who do come over and we hang out, like they don't act like they don't get that enough, right? Or they don't get it at all. And so like they come visit us once every 4 weeks. We know we're gonna lose some sleep, like parents of 3 kids, and it's because they're looking for that deep connection.
I think you answered your own question though. I mean, it's obviously like you both care. You actually care. You're curious. You ask questions that probe people to think. Ultimately, you're really good listeners.
Right.
And I think a lot of people just want someone to listen to them, right?
Yeah. One of the things that like we recently also discovered, because we're both into like developing personal development and growing, we realized we're each other's like soundboard every day, right? And meaning we only have each other's perspective too.
Right. Yeah.
And so when we have people over and when we have these conversations and people are willing to sit and hang out, it really gives us other perspectives that we really need, right? And ultimately, it helps us understand where we are, where we want to go, and just other ways of going about, like, even our own development or our life, whatever it is, right? And so it's very, like, energizing. It's very beneficial, and it's like those are the deep connections that mean a lot.
Yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah. So we talked a lot about childhood friendships.
Friends,
What about friendships that you have made more recently, or just like in your adult years? And like, how has that process been, like making friends in your 30s now?
Yeah, it's cool. It's like a really cool concept, because I think when you're younger and you have your childhood friends, you think that these are the friends that you're gonna end up going through your life with and into adulthood. Right? That's the hope at the time, right? And that's the vision. And I think it's really cool that you can still make friends at any point, right? And they can be lasting, and they can become very meaningful and very close. And it's actually very fulfilling when you make friends at this age, in our 30s or whatever, late 20s, whatever, where there's just more maturity now, right? And more sustenance.
Yes,
and
totally.
Being able to both sides bring something to the table and be able to watch each other grow now in this adulthood. And I think it's a very beautiful thing.
It is. Yeah. It's almost almost, I guess, like unfortunate, but it's part of life. We were saying you're kind of set up to fail,
Yeah,
with some of those younger
yeah.
friendships. But like as you develop and grow, the friendships that you make when you're older, you are consciously and intentionally choosing now based on your values.
Exactly.
Not
exactly.
because you like live close to each other.
Exactly.
And I mean, some of those come out from work,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Obviously, like there's something that ties you together.
But
It's like the bond that you create is much more intentional, I feel.
It's so much more intentional, and it becomes like your biggest support system now because you're adults, right? And like you maybe not be going through the same things like us, but you are able to bring more knowledge and be able to bring that your experiences that you've had in the past to be able to kind of figure out what you're doing now. And I think that's, like you said, we're set up to fail when we're younger, but it's beautiful to see that you can still have meaningful friends later on in life, right?
How have you made some of your older friendships? Because I feel like some people really struggle with making friendships.
Older friendships?
Sorry,
Or the
as in
newer?
Newer.
Newer?
Yeah, as in when you were older.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because some people struggle a lot,
To, like,
right?
to
To
find
make
friends.
friends
Yeah.
when they're older.
I think, again, it's like situational in a way where depending on the time and the place or whatever the person's going through, you find a thing to connect to. And like one of the things like we talked about, like you just said, was work. And I found a really good close girlfriend through that, just being at the right place at the right time, and like we found something to connect to. We just kept talking to each other every day, right? And then it comes to the point where you're like, okay, we just keep talking about this one thing. Like, how is your life? You know, like
Who are you actually?
Yeah, like what are you going through? Like, you know, like who are you? Like that type of thing. That becomes like a very special bond because you're bonding, like you said, over something, but you can actually bring this person moving forward, right? It's amazing to see you can still make these connections even now.
Yeah, I think it's just being like open to it, you know? Like both being open to reciprocating, but also being open to being the person who like initiates it and like reaches out.
Yeah.
So it's like, I do think you need some thing to connect you. Again, it's like sounds the same as like dating, you know?
Yeah,
like how do you meet people through dating?
Yeah, dating.
Well, what about your hobbies? Like I met Roman through jiu-jitsu ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Go out and do those things that you enjoy and like expose yourself to this world and kind of open yourself to receiving that energy from people and just be open. There are opportunities, but I think it's just being open to them. And like I know it can be difficult depending on where you are. It's funny because I feel like some people say Toronto's kind of cold, but like it's
kind of
also
cold. What do you mean?
People-wise, but I feel like people in Toronto are pretty friendly.
They are,
But the thing is, I talk a lot.
You can make friends if you're outgoing, but then if you're not, that's harder. I feel like that's a harder challenge, right?
Yeah, but that makes me think of this group that I'm part of on Facebook about this brand, that I love, Tibby. Right? And it's all these kind of like-minded women who have this commonality in this way of thinking about style. I mean, some of those people end up meeting in real life and hanging out with each other and all of that. But I guess if you're more like introverted and it's like a bit more scary to like literally go up to someone and talk, that's the good part of the internet is actual connection, right? Is like reaching out to people. You can really make connections like online first as well. I know a lot of creators and social media influencers and stuff, like they literally make all their friends through
that? Okay.
online. People end up, you just follow each other, you just message each other. It's very possible to make friendships when you're older.
For sure.
You just have to be open to it. And I actually think some of those friendships, like you said, end up being your most kind of cherished, deepest friendships.
Yeah.
It's true. Cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too.
Love you.
Love you.